OK, let's kick off with the seismic by-election result in Runcorn and Helsby, and we're asking whether Reform can now beat Labour in a general election. 0207 862 2222 is the number. The constituency was one of Labour's safest seats, but it's now in the hands of Reform after a recount because of the closeness of the tally. Nigel Farage's party won another MP, Sarah Potchin, beating Labour by 6 votes. And he celebrated the win by taking aim at Keir Starmer.
Because he's a coward. He doesn't lead from the front. You know, I mean, he obviously feared they might lose, therefore he didn't come. I knocked on doors for 8 hours today, and I would have been here in this hall with our candidate, regardless whether we'd won or lost by 6 votes. And somehow with Keir Starmer, who, by the way, is a perfectly decent human being, but somehow with Keir Starmer, it's caution, 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 and no one really knows quite what he actually believes.
What do you think of it, Jake?
Oh, well, the answer to the exam question is if that performance was repeated at a general election, absolutely Reform could win and Nigel Farage would be our Prime Minister. And if you project out that sort of swing, they have over 400 constituencies that win at the general election. But this wasn't a general election, it was a by-election. It had similarities with the general election. The turnout was very high, and it is a very, very big win for Reform, because they've been sort of ahead in opinion polls for quite some time. Opinion polls are opinion polls. This is real people going to the ballot box, putting votes in. A terrible night for Labour. Actually, also in that by-election, a pretty bad night for the Conservatives as well. Because
I wonder whether Reform, Farage has always said they take a chunk out of both the Conservatives and Labour. Maybe he's right.
Well, I think the Reform Party has been like a wrecking ball to the Conservatives. We saw that at the last general election campaign, and that's now been solidified at these local elections, which have been predominantly in kind of Tory areas. Elections are done thirds. So next year's local elections will have a lot more Labour seats in it, like in the cities and things like that. So absolutely, I think this has carried on the hollowing out of the Conservative Party, but it is also fair to say that the Reform Party is also coming after Labour. But what I would say is that I think the fact that Labour held on to 3 mayoral seats, I was quite surprised, but I thought Reform would take those seats.
Oh, take them all, really?
Yeah, I really did. And that's what campaigners were saying to me.
So what I think is quite interesting about these elections, they are predominantly Conservative areas, but they're the elections that came in 2021, Boris Johnson, post-COVID, vaccine release bounce. The Labour Party did appallingly in these elections 4 years ago. In fact, there was a lot of speculation at the time that it would be the end of Keir Starmer. So they are starting at a very low base and going backwards, which is why it's such a bad night. And on those moralities up in the north of Tynemere, which is a large part of the northeast, and Doncaster and the west of England, particularly those 2 northern ones, Doncaster and the northeast, they are areas where traditionally the Labour Party would have sort of weighed its majority rather than counted it. And both Doncaster and the North East was won by just 1%, in one case less than 1%, which would see the decimation of Labour in that area.
OK, the by-election was triggered after the resignation of the previous Labour MP, Mike Amesbury. He was given a suspended sentence for punching a man in the street last October. Very, very bad scenes here, and hitting him when he was down as well. Reform also had successes in mayoral elections held throughout the country, as we're just discussing. Dame Andrea Jenkyns, friend of this show, former Tory minister, has been elected the first mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, beating her former party. Labour have won 3 other contests, but Reform were snapping at their heels. So I can show you let me hear. Here we go. Greater Lincolnshire is the one that they won. Karen Clark, let's just see how close this is. 16,000, 15,700. Ross Jones, again, these are the ones that they have got back in here. 51,000 to 45,000, that's not so close. Look at this one, though, 23,805 to Ross Jones, 23,107 to Alexander Jones in Doncaster. So that one was very, very tight. So, yeah, snapping at the heels. Let's bring in Andrea Jenkyns, who's the new Reform mayor for Greater Lincolnshire. Congratulations, Andrea.
Hello, Joan. It's good to see you. And hello, Jake.
Good. And Ayesha, you forgot.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't. I don't know your name, Ayesha. Hi, Ayesha, as well.
So, OK, do you feel the Tories have done something very wrong here, Andrea, your old party?
Look, I mean, I felt really that, I left with what they did to Boris. I thought that, to be honest, it should have been public who threw out the prime ministers, not MPs. And I feel it's the massive defeats that they faced last year, in which Jake and I lost our seats. I don't think they ever learnt the lessons from that. And so I believe in democracy. I respected that result then. And I feel they're out of touch, the two mainstream parties. And I feel that at last they have a party who is listening to them, who's saying as it is, who's not afraid to say the things that most people think but don't always say.
And I started by congratulating you, and I should probably I'm just going to show the viewers the numbers here, because I should have probably underlined the congratulations, because Andrea here is on 104,000, and in second place, the Conservative Rob Waltham is 64,000. He didn't quite double his vote, but my goodness, it's extraordinary, actually.
Amazing. But I mean, I think what it was as well, there was a terrible smear campaign against me, Conservatives calling the police on me for something that was just politically motivated. The police didn't do anything, they didn't find anything. And it's just been a vile campaign. It's been soul destroying, if I'm honest. And I think that people don't like politics like that, do they? They like straight talking, honesty, and they don't like to see this dirty game playing. So I think that went against them as well. I think that backfired as well, Jeremy.
So we've got one of the responses you gave to reporters this morning, Andrea. I haven't seen this yet. Let's have a look at it.
Made a comment about her South African accent. What did you mean by that?
What I meant is, how can they say I've been parachuted in when I spent most of my life in Lincolnshire, school,
Why mention the accent, sorry?
Because the irony of saying someone's been parachuted in who's not even from the country. I mean, I went to school, college, university, so I think...
So someone who's got an accent can't be from this county?
I think, actually, I'm not even going to answer any more of your questions. I think that your questioning is quite divisive.
I'm trying to work out the background. You had commented that you shouldn't have been accused of being parachuted in by somebody who had a foreign accent.
It goes deeper than that, Jeremy. This lady, the independent candidate, her husband, who's also election agent, reported me to the council. There was a big hearing where they was trying to get me struck off so I couldn't stand. So they've put me through hell. So of course I'm going to, call out her ironic behaviour. Of course I am. That's what it's much deeper than this. They tried to get me struck off. There was a big hearing. I had to get a barrister there, which it all got dismissed because there was no truth in what they was alleging. And of course, thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money in doing that. So that's what this is about.
Is reform ready to run the country, given that you'll need policies on things that you haven't even thought about, like the NHS?
No, I mean, what I'm impressed with reform, despite what the Ruperts and Ben Habibs of the world say about reform, I've been impressed with it. They are a professional outfit. I mean, the training that they've given their council candidates, we've got a whole package to support them as well. And I mean, my manifesto for Lincolnshire, I've discussed it with Zia, with Nigel, with Richard. We've seen policies being formed on illegal migration. We've seen it on net zero and energy. So, I mean, we're 4 years away from election. Quite often, parties don't reveal their manifestos, but we are. And we're working on policies on the NHS, etc. too. So, look, this is an important moment for reform, Jeremy. We go from being a protest party to actually having some power. So I take this very seriously. And I want to demonstrate that, when we get given the opportunity, we can deliver on services for local people, and really so it could become a blueprint of what we can do in government. All
right, we've got Ayesha and Jake, I mentioned in the studio. You can ask Andrea a question or congratulate her if you want to. It's up to you, you two.
Well, Andrea, congratulations. I mean, you're such an interesting figure, because 10 years ago, you knocked out Ed Balls. I remember that election very well. So you're quite a trailblazer in terms of your first. But what do you hope to deliver for the people of Lincolnshire? Because local government is really tough. The financial climate is very, very difficult. What do you hope to achieve?
No, I was in local government. I was a Lincolnshire County Councillor. I moved to Lincolnshire when I was 7 years old, went to school, college, university there. And so I know it very well. Now, what I will do is, as part of my manifesto, just like they have a transport for London, I will form a transport for Greater Lincolnshire, where we have the key stakeholders on there, because it's so vast, the county, it's 3 hours from one end to the other. It's so diverse, and the transport and infrastructure has never been right. So I want to get this body together so we start fixing these problems, because I used to live in the rural area in Lincolnshire, where a bus route is a last resort rather than a lifeline. I think we need to relook at services like this. I'm going to set up an industry-led skills board. Like British Steel, for example, they can't get enough engineers. Our farmers can't get enough young people to work the technology of their equipment. So there's just so much we can do. I want to ensure that we get the skills so the county can thrive.
Thank you very much, Andrea Jenkyns. Congrats. See you in the studio soon, I hope. And wow, big
Take
night
care.
thank you, take care. Big night for reform. We go back to the by-election and Runcorn and Helsby. Let's just see if we can tell the story of the night through this, okay, because it's a very, very big result. And if we were going to sort of sum it up in 2 words, we'd say the boxer and the general. And I'll explain, but let's go to the battlefield first of all. So here we are, northwest England. Just bring this forward if we can. Cumbria, Lancashire, you've got Liverpool, Manchester, and keep your eye on that area there. So we'll just pull it up here. So that becomes this area, and I pointed at the constituency right there. And that is Runcorn and Helsby, and here's the boxer. So we've already said this guy decides he's going to hit his constituents. You can't do that in politics. So he lost his seat, and that's the end of him, even though he'd won a pretty handy majority in 2024 of 14,696 votes. And that majority is quite interesting. So we're going to bring in the general now and explain why. So here's Farage, the teal smoke coming from his flaming lance and leading his troops into battle. He's been lucky, and generals need to be lucky. And let me explain why. We go back to that majority, okay? Here we have the MPs elected for Labour at the last election, 411. And we go from the biggest majority, which is roughly 20,000, to the tightest, which was 15 votes only. And where Amesbury was in the safest block here, the 50 safest. So Amesbury's down here. And the reason I say Farage was lucky is because he hit on a seat by pure chance, just because of a fight one night outside a pub. He's taken a safe Labour seat, but it's not so safe that he was knocked back. He took it. If it had been a less safe seat, they would have said, Reform were always going to take it. But this is a really, really good zone for him to show what Reform could do. And he couldn't have chosen the seat better, could he, if he'd chosen it himself?
Well, sometimes these quirks happen. I remember there was a man called Eric Joyce, a Labour MP, who threw a punch in the House of Commons bar, and and that created a butterfly effect, which actually ended up with Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader of the Labour Party. It's very complicated. I won't go into it.
It is, but don't worry, I know the story.
That's very interesting.
But sometimes there are these really interesting kind of quirks in politics. But look, after tonight, there is no doubt that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party and the whole country does need to take Reform seriously. I think it's unlikely that Reform would win an outright majority at the next general election. However, it's not inconceivable that they do get some sort of power through some kind of coalition with the Conservatives.
Jake, I'll ask you for your comments in just a second. And we're now joined by the Reform Deputy Leader, Richard Tice. So hello to you, Richard.
Very good morning to you, Jeremy and team. And yes, it's a good morning. I'm here in Hull. We're looking forward to the declaration of the mayoral count later today. And it's been a very good night for reformers. I think most people are now aware we're winning hundreds of council seats. We've won the parliamentary by-election against the odds, the 16th safest seat, as you were saying just before the break. And just to put that in context, Jeremy, that's the equivalent of winning Hackney South from Diane Abbott. That's the achievement that Sarah Pochin has just secured in Runcorn and Helsby. And in the county of Lincolnshire, you've just been talking to Dame Andrea Jenkyns. I'm very confident that we're going to win control of that council from the Conservatives. And, that's a significant statement. We're taking votes from the Labour Party. We're taking votes from the Tories. People have had enough. People are sick to death of getting poorer month on month, ever worse public services, whilst this government pours hundreds of millions of pounds, billions of pounds of our money overseas on daft projects and continues to allow tens of thousands of illegal migrants crossing the channel, costing us an absolute fortune, and expecting the British people to pay for it.
It's amazing because I hadn't even asked you a question, and you've unloaded the whole thing on me there. Jake wants to ask you a question, Richard.
So, Richard, hi. Congratulations, a brilliant night for Reform, not the best night for the Conservatives, I have to admit. A terrible night for Labour as well. But how politics is all about momentum. Clearly, Reform has the momentum. Big set of elections coming up next year, Wales, Scotland. What plans do you have? One, to make sure you can maintain that momentum through those elections, and two, to ensure that all of these new Reform people, many of them with little experience, are going to deliver for the people who voted for them?
Wow, that's a big...
Two questions.
That's
Great
a
question.
big...
Lovely to see you, Jay. Well, obviously, our carefully guarded plans, I'm not going to give them to the opposition, but I appreciate the question and the effort. And with regard to, yes, we're now, not only are we sort of we're the real opposition, but we've also now, as we win councils, we will have to manage and deliver. And that's a great thing because we need to show people that actually we can manage and run councils successfully, and I'm confident we can. And that then is, in a sense, as you move towards the devolved nation elections next May, we can say that proves that you should let us run, for example, Wales. But you're right, Jay. Look, no one is saying it's easy. I touched earlier in my comments, we've got serious financial problems. But, I think actually a fresh pair of eyes, looking at the books, the finances, the contracts that have been in place, many of which have been badly procured, we've got to save money and we've got to sort things out. We cannot keep carrying on as we are, spending more than we're earning at council and national level and expect it to end well. It's not going to.
All right, we've got a caller for you, Richard. Let's see. Trevor in Cheshire, you're through to the Deputy Leader of Reform.
Hello, Jeremy. Good morning.
It's Richard you're talking to. What would you like to ask him?
Yeah, I'd like to know what he's going to do with the National Health Service, because I'm certain they've been together, Mr Musk and Mr Farage, and they've been talking about the National Health Service. In fact, they're going to bring something in. And in America, I've been to America and the States, I've been to Washington, and I've been in the White House.
Right.
I can tell you now, it's private medical insurance in America, and it's $530 a month. And there's 2 months of that year that they're not covered.
Okay, Trevor, let's get the question to Richard. I've got the gist of it, which is you're going to get into power and you're going to say we can't afford the NHS and you're going to privatise it.
And Trevor, good morning. And that's complete nonsense. We've always said, of course, the NHS should be free at the point of delivery, but I think everybody recognises that it's badly managed. There's far too much bureaucracy, and the processes drive everybody mad. And whenever I talk about it, day in, day out, I get contacted by nurses and doctors who say, you're so right, there's so much waste, there's so much mismanagement, and frankly, we've got to sort it out. When I'm recently in Boston and Skegness talking to GP surgeries, pharmacists, they're pulling their hair out about the lunacy of things like GDPR, meaning they can't access each other's patient records, therefore they can't deliver patient care at the right time, getting better outcomes. Those are the sort of changes that you can make and would make significant differences. And yes, in our last contract last year, what I said, still free at the point of delivery. But you know what? If you can afford to pay a bit more, for whatever reason, maybe we should encourage you to do that, to motivate you to do that, so that you free up capacity in the NHS.
All right. Sorry, Richard. I know we need to let you go in a minute. I just want to ask you this one question. Your party is a one-man band, right? And it's Farage's way or the highway, as Ben Habib discovered, as Rupert Lowe discovered. You've not fallen out with him yet, which is some sort of record. It's dangerous, isn't it? Because without Farage, you've got nothing.
Well, everybody's entitled to their view. That's the joy of free speech. But look, Nigel and I have worked closely on a variety of campaigns, pretty successfully for the last decade now. Time flies when you're having fun, and we've now got an extra MP. We've got hundreds of councillors, and sure, we will push on. And am I saying, Jeremy, we're all perfect? No. Will we make mistakes? Of course. The difference is if you adopt a business-like attitude, when you make mistakes, instead of doing what the main two parties do, which is pretend you haven't made them, cover them up, lie to the British people, we'll be honest about it, say, yeah, we got this right, we screwed up on that, we'll learn from it and try not to make the same mistake. I think that business-like attitude is what we need in politics to save our country, because at the moment, we're in serious financial trouble.
OK, thank you, Richard, and have a good day. After the break, we're taking more of your calls on whether Reform, Richard Tice's party, can win a general election. Are they just getting started? 0207 862 2222. Beaten Labour in a by-election in one of Labour's safest seats. It's a peachy seat that they've got here because it shows what they can do. Michael in Peterborough, hello.
Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm well. This looks very interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, not exactly unsurprising, though, to be honest.
There's a lot of anger at everyone.
Absolutely. I think, to be fair, people are voting Reform now because the two-party system, the two parties just aren't listening. Labour talk a lot, but say very little. In actual reality, there's an issue with migration, and that's what this has really been about, where the elderly are having £300 taken off them, and yet we're putting up migrants in hotels. It is insane what's happening, and yet people just aren't dealing with it, and people are genuinely frustrated and genuinely angry. Them showing their anger.
You raise a good point. It comes up a lot that the migrants in hotels story has driven people absolutely bonkers, and they don't hear politicians caring about it.
Well, I think it has angered a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people turned away from the Conservatives at the last general election, because, the Conservatives talked really tough on immigration. I mean, David Cameron talked about getting migration down to the tens of thousands, and that clearly didn't happen. The figures absolutely soared. So I think that is true. I think that is a factor. The question is, though, is who is going to actually solve that problem, because it is a very difficult thing.
Trump is solving it in the States.
But the thing is, they're also really angry with the Labour Party. Keir Starmer said, I've got a solution for this problem. And he hasn't, because it's actually gone up.
Well, but smash the gangs, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's people's frustration. They're basically saying, look, we kicked the Conservatives out because we made ourselves unelectable. We gave the Labour Party a go. We don't like for winter fuel allowance, migration, whatever. We don't like lots of things we've done. Who else is available? Yeah. And Reform's there saying, hello, hi, what about us? Yeah. And I think people are going for it.
I think
it's interesting, as much as Trump is mocked and hated by some, if you look at the figures on the southern border, he's cut them by about 85%.
Yeah. Well,
and he's done that in almost with the military.
Well, let's wait and see before we've had 100 days of Trump, before we say that Trump's a huge success. Remember,
no, I'm just saying that one
is
policy
also tanking under
that's not what I'm saying.
We've had 9 months of Keir Starmer and it's going up.
I'm saying,
and the economy is also tanking
the
as well.
idea that as an island we can't protect our border.
But please, let's just be honest about one thing, right? This country is in a massive mess. And we had 14 years of the Conservative government. And some of the problems predate the Conservative government, to be absolutely fair. The idea, and I would say this to any of your listeners viewers who I think are intelligent people, the idea that in less than a year you're going to wave a magic wand and suddenly immigration is going to be fixed, the health service is going to be fixed, productivity is going to be fixed. It is going to take time. I accept Labour has to move quicker on change, but let's be realistic. There's not a magic wand that people wave.
The numbers of the boat migrants are going up. Thank you, Michael. Kath in West Yorkshire, hello.
Hello, good morning.
What do you think of this? Is this a bit of an earthquake going on here?
Yes, I do, and I think the earthquake will carry on into the next general election. I think the last Conservative government, and actually, like Ayesha said, it's pre-Conservative as well, and definitely this government have done nothing but lie through the back teeth about what they're going to do. What this country needs, Jeremy, is someone to lead it that's got common sense and a backbone, not a goddamn university degree. And as for what the gentleman said,
Jake,
they'll all be newbies and they won't be experienced. Well, if the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is an example of experience, Give me inexperienced anytime, because at least they can be taught.
Well, they won't have any...
Kath, as you've asked me, let me try and answer that, because, this is a big test for Reform. They're going to probably be the largest party, certainly in local government, in places like county boroughs, in places like Lancashire, just over the border from you, Kath, on the right side of the Pennines, as I would say. So the big test for them is, can you make a success of this? And actually, I wish them well with that. I want them to make a success of it, because I want our country to succeed. But for the British people who are thinking about whether a Reform government is something they may want in the future, this is just a really good thing for you and other voters to look at and say, are they as good as I think they might be? And if the answer is yes, you'll probably vote for them.
They may get in without demonstrating that at all. We're in the kind of mood where when a government says, do you want us back in, everyone just shouts no. I mean, that's a lot of Western countries now. So they may not be tested and they may win power. By the way, the Tories had about 900 seats they were contesting. It looks like they're going to lose half of them. So, Kath, thank you. It's a really, actually, as it shapes up, it's been a big night. And the mayoral contest that Labour squeaked also showing us all kinds of things as well. We'll keep going with this because we've got loads of people wanting to speak to us about it. Can Reform win the general election? Is Nigel Farage the next Prime Minister? Some more calls on whether Reform can win a general election. They took one of Labour's safest seats last night. Top 15 seat, 0207 862 2222 is the number. Maybe we should have known the writing was on the wall when Runcorn and Helsby Labour candidate Karen Shaw got this welcome from a constituent while canvassing.
Here with Karen Shaw, is the Labour candidate in the by-election.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
No chance of me giving you my vote. Now, if it was Zara Sultana, happily. But I can't stand the man, wouldn't vote for the man. I'm going green. Bye-bye.
OK.
Oh, that went the way I wasn't expecting. So she's on the left.
Yes, and I think it's very important. I know we're talking a lot about Reform, and fair play, they've had a good night. But just remember, in terms of the Labour Party, they're also going to face challenge, particularly next year, from the Greens.
So Zara Sultana would be that
independents
left wing
as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Nick is in Devon, beautiful Devon. Whereabouts in Devon, Nick?
Oh, hiya, Jeremy. Yeah, we're in Crediton, Devon.
Lovely, lovely.
In the middle of Devon.
Wonderful. So, what do you think then about Reform? I would have thought they could go take a lot of those seats in Devon, actually.
Well, they may well do. Let's wait and see. But, Jeremy, there's something actually in the old saying, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the SDP Liberal Alliance, which came up in a similar way as what's happening at the moment with Reform. Yeah. And in those days, of course, you see people like ministers like Roy Jenkins got 50-60% of the vote at by-elections before the general election. And it's exactly the same now. Reform, they're not going to do it at a general election.
I hear you, Nick, but is there a danger? Listen, we're probably the same age, so I remember that, the Gang of Four as well. But aren't we falling victim to analogue thinking here, Nick? We think it's going to be like it was 40 years ago. And actually, you can see, look at Trump. You can see the whole table turned over, Nick.
Yeah, well, I see that. I understand that. And you say, is it analogue thinking? No, I don't think it is, to be honest with you, because if you want a Trump-type party, I think once the British people look at America and the mess they're making at the moment of their very right-wing sort of skew to the right, as you would say, I mean, I think that, people will start realising, and don't forget, the big parties will start sort of aiming their guns at them now. And also, I mean, Farage is, yes, very charismatic and very good and on the stump and all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to have to start running councils now, and it's a different ballgame trying to run a council.
OK, Nick, thank you. Hey, Mish in Edinburgh, hi.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Jeremy.
I'm trying to imagine Reform winning in Scotland. Now, that is a stretch.
Yes, I agree.
Not that crazy? No.
But can Reform win a general election? I wouldn't perhaps go quite that far, but I certainly think they would have a good chance of being either the leader of the opposition or forming a coalition government. But on one condition,
Go on.
And it's a big one. That is that we, in the meantime, have switched to proportional representation.
Well, yeah, I know the unfairness. What they got more votes than the Lib Dems at the last election, and they got 70 fewer seats. But we got to run with that, Hamish. That's just the way it is right now. It's it seems unfair, but also it's beautifully clear. I mean, they wouldn't want proportional representation in Runcorn last night.
Interestingly, though, in Scotland, Reform, even though they have very little infrastructure, are actually polling reasonably well in Scotland. So that, and can I just ask Hamish a question quickly?
Yeah, please.
Hamish, big elections coming up in Scotland next year in Holyrood. What's your sense of what's going to happen? Do you think Labour could win, or do you think the SNP can hang on? Because the SNP's been in power for a long time in Scotland now.
Yes. You caught me on the hook there. I don't think Reform have a big chance of getting into Holyrood, I must say. But yes, I think the SNP will have to watch their step at the next election year.
Okay, Hamish, thank you so much. Derek is in Northamptonshire. Hi, Derek.
Oh, good morning, Jeremy and panel.
Well, the big lesson today, Derek, seems to be that Reform are doing what they always said they could do, which is to take as many Labour votes as Tory ones. And that's the game changer.
Yes, I think that Reform stand a very good chance of winning the general election, mainly because I think people are looking for something different to the two main parties, especially if we had proportional representation, which I think we do need. But I also consider that perhaps high on the priority list for most people is the rate of migration into Britain, which is, I think, around about 11.5 million since 1989. And interestingly, that's when water privatisation took place, and we now raise questions with the water industry. Why are sewage treatment works overloaded? Why have we got river pollution? And I'm
trying to work out there's a connection between a massive amount of migration and the water industry being privatised.
Well, that took place in 1989, but since then there's been a massive increase in population, which has put an increased loading on.
Jake has a thought.
Derek, let me ask you a question, because I think you're the second caller in the row now to say, what about proportional representation? Of course, there is a version of proportional representation in Wales and in Scotland as well. Do you think that's the real breakthrough moment for Reform to win in those national elections for Scotland and Wales next year?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they win it, even though we didn't have proportional representation.
Okay.
Well, clearly, if they repeated this result they've had overnight in Runcorn, that would put them on for over 400 seats.
Thank you, Derek. I do wonder whether Trump might be a problem for Mr. Farage, because they are buddies, and you can see that Trump is like a runaway train. We don't know where it's going to end up. It's not going to be at the next station, that's for sure. And Farage, at some point, this might damage him a bit, mightn't it, Jake?
Well, if you listen to some of the language he's used around Trump, particularly recently following the appalling scenes that we saw with President Zelensky in the Oval Office in the White House, Nigel Farage has distanced himself over the last few weeks from Trump. I think he needs to continue to do that because, of course, really unusually, his electoral fortunes may be linked to a country thousands of miles away about whether President Trump is successful.
Closer to home, do you think Kemi Badenoch is to blame for this?
No, I think Kemi Badenoch is doing what all parties do after a huge election defeat, which is going and hiding in a corner and actually working out how they can get back to their winning ways. It's what Keir Starmer did after the 2019 election, which was terrible for the Labour Party. They bounced straight back. I mean, they came and won the biggest majority in the history of their political movement. The challenge Kemi has, though, Jeremy, is that the rules of politics have now changed. So the Labour Party would usually be having a honeymoon period, they'd be popular, they'd be doing good stuff, people would be happily rushing out and voting for them in local elections. That's not happened. And they've sort of looking up saying, well, there's lots of stuff going on in the country that we're unhappy with. I think whoever was in power, they'd be unhappy, by the way. Who is fresh and new? The Conservative Party is still in a period of sort of crying in the corner, and Reform are there. And I'll make one prediction today, which I think is really interesting, that this is a huge springboard for Reform. If they spring from these set of election results to winning in Wales, then I would give them odds-on favourite to form the next government. By the way, I think they will win in Wales.
Look, I think we have to take Reform seriously, but think carefully about untested policies. Look at Donald Trump. He's doing lots of crazy things like the tariffs, which are not going so well. And just think about the NHS, because that is a really important thing. Nigel Farage has got like 3 different answers about the future of the NHS. Just think about whether or not you want to pay for the NHS.
Thank you for all your
Well, you do pay for it.
I know,
We pay for our tax. Everyone pays for it already anyway.
Insurance, which is very, very,
well, it doesn't
very
seem
different.
to be working at the moment, right? So something's got to change.